I'm going to read the description here. With a style perpetually galvanized by darkness. And next up, we have a panel hosted by Shauna Connell called Embedded Evaluation, Capacity Building for the Sector and Beyond.
Good afternoon, everyone. What an incredible gathering this has been. Our last but not least session is evaluation. And I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Annalee Yassey, Dr. Marty Badham, and Dr. Kim Vanderwoord. Each will be presenting unique approaches to evaluation. Please read their full bios in the chat. At the end of the session, we'll have time for Q&A, and please post your questions in the chat box throughout our session. Before we start, I'd like to briefly share with you my story. I've been doing evaluations for 30 years now for work in this sector in my role as an ED. I began with doing the standard quantitative and qualitative evaluations, usually in the context of submitting an evaluation report to a funder at the end of a project. It feels like over the last 10 years or so, evaluation methods have expanded. Yes, we're still measuring processes, outcomes, impacts, and benefits, but maybe we're asking more questions. The who, what, where, why, when, and how. Who is the evaluation really for? Who is doing the evaluation? What is it about? Where is it taking place? Why do we need to do it? Is it for capacity building, program development, for systemic change within an organization? Is it for shedding light on what is not working? Or is it a necessary external report for a funder? When do we need to do it? At the end of a project or throughout? How are we gathering material for evaluation? Do we have many people contributing their viewpoints in their voice? Or is it written by one staff person subjectively? And how are we presenting the evaluation? In written format, in a video, in art, photographs, testimonials, in person? I had the privilege of working with Radha Nair, a professional evaluator, for a 3-year period with ArtBridges about 6 or 7 years ago. In the first year, we developed an evaluation framework and tools. In the second and third years, we put the tools into action. It was rigorous. It involved 7 staff and multiple community partners and stakeholders. It was a developmental evaluation. RADA included everything from staff writing monthly journals to pop-up surveys to 30-minute calls with 40 community partners to gathering testimonials and stories. We had to record stats too. How many community engagements we had each month via emails, tweets, phone calls, etc. The feedback from community partners, participants, stakeholders, and staff was incredible. It allowed for the project to expand capacity in ways which I never would have imagined. Participants in the evaluation actually contributed to change and development in the organization. They felt included in the process. It was a far cry from simply filling in performance indicators on a spreadsheet for a report. One of my all-time favorite questions to answer in an evaluation questionnaire is, what were the major lessons learned? This question wipes away any performance anxiety, and it's an opportunity to really share the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's where reflection and learning really happen, and the recipient of the evaluation can learn about the authentic aspects of the project and not simply hear about all the good stuff. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Annalee Yassey. Dr. Annalee Yassey is a professor in the School of Population and Public Health at UBC and holds a Tier 1 Canada Research Chair in Global Health and Capacity Building. She's a specialist in both public health and preventative medicine, as well as occupational medicine. Dr. Yassey's research focuses on issues and methods in community-based health research, transdisciplinarity, and bilateral intercultural learning in North-South partnerships. She's interested in ethics in global health research, the social determination of health, an ecosystem approach to health, and the use of arts-based methods in health intervention research. As a co-investigator in the Multi-Institutional Arts for Social Change Partnership, her team at UBC led the development of an online tool to guide community arts organizations in evaluating their programs, calling attention to the importance of program theory and clarity of objectives, as well as the use of multiple methods to capture desired objectives. Dr. Annalee Yassey, over to you.
I'm just sharing my screen here. Thank you so much for that introduction. In fact, everything I'm going to say has already been touched on by Shauna. So this is really just an elaboration. It really is an honor and a privilege to be able to present this tool that was, as Shauna has stated, developed in the course of a partnership that was funded by the Social Science and Humanities Research Council, led by Judith, but which my team at UBC worked on with Judith and Shauna, and really with input from the other 5 universities involved and the 40 or so artists and organizations. The tool really is designed for everybody. You know, who is the tool for? It's for people who have not thought much about evaluation, but there's also, I think, things in it that even for people who have worked on evaluation for a long time, who are looking for other tools or questionnaires or modalities that they could absorb into their own work. Before going into the walking you through the tool, though, I do want to emphasize the importance of context and social theory, which I believe Marnie will be talking more about. There's a section within the tool on this, but it's so important to understand why your program has been developed and what you're interested in capturing in the evaluation. Is it how participants feel empowered in their daily lives? Is it that, plus also how they're able to interact with their social reality? For example, you know, well, whatever it is that has been holding them back, have they been able to change that? Are they working on a larger level? So you want to know to what extent you want to focus on the micro, the individual, the meso, the group level, or the societal level. The tool itself has many different ways that you can approach it, and towards the end of this talk, we'll have some time to try out some, you know, go into some questions, a quiz, to just have you think about it more. There's also some examples that are in the tool that you can, you know, give you an idea of what others have done. For example, if you want to look at a mixed method evaluation for a dance program for elders, there's a few articles in here that show what other people have done in that regard. That it hasn't been updated, unfortunately, in a few years, but the 50 or so examples here could still be somewhat useful for you. There's also examples of scenarios where we try to animate different scenarios of actual evaluations that have been done. That range from more simple to some complex ones. This one was based on a social circus program that we actually ended up writing a whole book about, with different chapters on different approaches. That's called the Art of Collectivity, of McGill University Press book. So the tool has some examples from various evaluations that have been done, and there's also a whole course within it on the basics, the ethics, the theories and methods, the techniques, the analysis and dissemination. So you can go into this, you know, from this tool. It's open access whenever you'd like. So what I'm going to do is just walk through the very basics of the steps in evaluation. You know, as Shauna was saying, the most important thing is to ask yourself, why are you doing the evaluation? And evaluation shouldn't be an afterthought. But you know, before you even start your program, you should have thought about, you know, how are you going to evaluate? How are you going to know if you're accomplishing what you want to accomplish? The next question is, who will you work with in the evaluation? You want to work with those parties that have been, you know, most instrumental over time, but also those people who you most want to hear about the evaluation. Artists, program participants, facilitators, researchers, funders, community groups, social activists. And you have to think about what role you want them to play within the evaluation. I'm scrolling down so you can see there's so much text about each of these issues, so you can go back and read about it. In terms of hiring an evaluator, it's important that you find someone who not only knows how to conduct evaluations and has done research, but also knows the art form and knows the community that you're working in. So once you've decided why you're doing the evaluation and who you will work with, think about how you have been monitoring the program throughout. You don't necessarily have had to have a logic model written out with your program theory. You probably have asked for regular reports. You've probably visited your program, asked for feedback. A lot of art forms have closing circles that formally have given participants a chance to share their feelings about the sessions. All that should be part of your evaluation. So what methods will you use? We've divided this tool into arts-based methods, quantitative methods, qualitative, and mixed methods. For arts-based methods, there's a range of different methods you could use, from drawing a picture or writing a poem to asking people to take pictures to performative inquiry. The point I want to make, though, is that Arts for Social Change projects can be evaluated with arts-based methods, with quantitative methods like surveys, and other data, with qualitative methods like interviews, focus groups, or arts-based methods. But you can also use arts-based evaluation methods for any program, for seeing whether a computer training program is working. So whether or not your program is arts-based, you can still use arts-based methods, and vice versa. So go back to so aside from deciding on whether you're going to use quantitative methods, qualitative methods, arts-based methods, mixed methods, in what order, you'll still have to figure out how you will gather the information, because each of these, there's different techniques for each of these different methods, guides, books, and so on. And so the tool goes through for each of these, what you might want to use. For example, if you want to do quantitative number gathering, you can design your own survey. Now, it only makes sense to do a survey if you have enough people in your program. If you only have 10 or 15 people, you probably don't want to do a survey. You can probably do better with interviews and focus group kind of things. But if you have lots of people, you may want to use a survey. And here we have examples of various surveys that have been used that you can just pull off this web if you want to measure self-esteem or mental health or satisfaction or whatever. So we've accumulated some of them, some for working with children, and so on. In addition, I might take just another minute for qualitative evaluations are extremely important. But how you do them also takes some thought, in terms of if you're doing interviews, who you're going to interview, whether they're in-depth interviews, key informant interviews, how many you need, whether you're going to have a structured interview guide or be completely open-ended, who will do them, how long. So as I scroll through this, you can see that there's all sorts of different things to think about, including things such as a Hawthorne effect, being there, or observation will change things. That's an intervention in itself. For focus groups, you have to think about how many people you want in your focus group and whether you want to mix everyone together. Sometimes it's better to have smaller focus groups with more like-minded people. Sometimes it's good to have groups that mix people up. But in thinking about all the different issues, you may want to think about power dynamics. So to give an opportunity for those people who speak less to have an opportunity to speak, and so on. So once you've decided what methods you use, what techniques you're going to use within them, that you have to figure out how you're going to analyze your data in a way that won't be just written off as your subjective opinion or the interviewer's, the evaluator's subjective opinion. So again, there's different analytic methods for each of the different modalities. If you're into quantitative data analysis, we talk about primary data being surveys that you design or use the already developed ones. Secondary data means you're using existing sources, such as if you have a program for kids who have dropped out of school, you may want to look at has this school dropout rate been improved since your program began. Depending on the population that you're targeting will determine whether there's good secondary data that you can call upon. And then we have different techniques here of how to gather and analyze the data that you can go into, as you can see. Then quite importantly, after you've analyzed your data, how you share your results, and why spread the information. Hopefully you aren't just doing this for your funder, in which case you put a report in and that's it. If you're an academic, you may want to do academic articles, of course, but there's other ways that are really important to share text-based information. But there's also important ways for oral sharing, such as conferences, meeting with policymakers, community town halls. But don't forget that the people who are participants in the program who you've interviewed or you ask questions of, or the interview, or your evaluator has, will want to know what was found. And so don't forget to get back to them with a synthesis of it. There's also social media and arts-based sharing. You can do a play about the evaluations and what you've learned from it. Keep in mind that beyond this guide, by the way, there's lots of other really good, useful guides. The Jumbelese one is here, and arts-based evaluations there. So we have some references in this tool to other material that's available. What I was planning to do now is actually use the quiz to generate some further thinking about some of these issues. More often than not, there's no right or wrong answer, but quizzes help us think about the issues. So we may think, well, if you're an artist, you want to use arts-based methods for evaluation, and that's a good thing. But think about, well, this question here: the advantages of arts-based methods include the following, except, well, do arts-based methods address, challenge, and rebalance traditional power dynamics? Too bad. I mean, problem with these online things is I can't see the audience and know who's putting up their hand or what your answers are. But yeah, arts-based methods can do that. Can they express participants' expression through art and show insights? Of course. Can they encourage people who may be reluctant to speak in a focus group? Yes, arts-based methods are very good for that. Can they accommodate people who learn in different ways? Of course. But the answer that that is looked for in this question is that to use arts-based methods, you need people who are skilled in that art form to interpret it properly, interpret what the artist is trying to show. So it's important, if you're going to use arts-based methods, to have an evaluator who's familiar with this modality. If you're an academic involved in evaluation, you may want to ask yourself whether you want to wait until you've written this up for peer review, submitted for peer review, before you share your information with your partners. So we ask this audience, true or false? If you're an academic, wait for peer reviews. In the opinion of the people who put this together, false, because your community partners and participants may be a better sounding board, and they need not wait for academic peer review. So if you're an academic, I would like to encourage you, go to your community partners and your participants first before you submit for publication. I'm not going to use these ones because they're more complicated. I know I'm past my 10-minute mark, but ethics is a really important area, and I didn't mean to actually gloss it over in the menu, because if you need to consider, the question is, do you need to consider ethics if you're submitting if you aren't working with a university? And of course not, because the ethical issues involved are really quite substantial. Because if you're doing an evaluation, you may inadvertently hurt certain participants or the staff in your program, which you don't want to do. So that there's various things that you should think about that are really in the area of ethics in terms of your community university partnership, if you're a university, how you're including the art-based, the team issues. So again, think about those kind of things. If you receive the results of an evaluation of a similar program to one you recently evaluated, but in a different community, is it that use the same art form, the same age group of people, the same evaluation methods, but the results are different? So what do? Do you go back and check your analysis? Do you decide that the other evaluation must be incorrect, or do you consider the different contexts? So the different context is probably the best answer, because every context is different. And you can use the exact same evaluation methods with the same kind of age group and come out with different results because the complexity of your context matters. I think at this point, I'll stop sharing so that we have a lot of time for discussion at the end to come back to this tool and use it in however way we want. So at this point, I'll turn it back to Shauna, and hopefully we'll have some discussion afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Annalee Yassy. What an incredible tool. I particularly noted the ethical issues that you talked about. And when we talk about evaluating programs which might involve children, we have to think of that, or vulnerable populations. What are appropriate things to evaluate? How do we evaluate ethically? Anyhow, we'll get back to that later. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Marnie Badham. With a 25-year history of art and social justice practice, Marnie is an expert in socially engaged art, participatory research methodologies, and the politics of cultural measurement. Marnie is a senior research fellow at the School of Art, Contemporary Art and Social Transformation Research Group, and the Cultural Value Impact Network, RMIT University, Narm, Melbourne, Australia. Marnie was recently awarded a 3-year Australian Research Council linkage project, Ambitious and Fair, towards a sustainable visual arts sector. With Goon Dujamara artist Vicky Cousins, Marnie has co-developed Listening to Country, Listening to Community, towards co-created framework of value and values for the Dandenong Creek Art Trail. Marnie advocates self-determination in evaluation partnerships, Coming Back Out Ball with LGBTI+ seniors, Indigenous Traditional Dance Project, and Nega Mumu Decolonizing Motherhood. Marnie is chair of International Art Spaced Artist Residency Program in Western Australia, and artistic advisor to bus projects in Melbourne. Over to you, Dr. Marnie Badham.
Thanks, Shauna. Can you hear me? Can someone give me a thumbs up?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Shauna. I'm sorry that was such a mouthful, but I just wanted to say first, I've been really enjoying listening to the sophisticated and generous conversations over the last 3 days, and thanks to the organizers for making it happen. I also wanted to say thank you to Maggie for leading that really wonderful grounding ceremony this morning. I acknowledge the traditional custodians on the lands and waters where we're each calling in from today, and their elders past and present. I'm originally from Saskatchewan, shout out to Commonweal, and for the past 15 years, I've been living as an uninvited guest on Bunurong country of the Eastern Kulin Nations in so-called Australia. So I'm gonna share my screen, hopefully. Oops. How's that? So let's have a conversation about value and values. And thanks, Annalee. I think the 2 very short case studies that I'll present today will help illustrate some of the questions and points that you made in your presentation. And it's really great to know you and your work as well. So you probably don't need to have a definition, but here's one in relation to the evaluation, sometimes the dreaded evaluation work that I'm invited to do with communities and artists. My interest is supporting artists and communities to make sense of their work and help to communicate the significance and meaning of their work. I'm not interested in ticking boxes and counting heads for funders measurement. They can do that themselves or fund you really well to do it. My attention is also focused on the unpacking of the potential for harm in this work and the often unintended negative colonial consequences of our work in art for social change. So I want to start with this drawing from Swiss artist Thomas Hirschhorn. We can debate if we like his work or not later. As many of you would know, Hirschhorn makes complex installations, monuments, for public spaces from everyday materials like cardboard, tinfoil, duct tape. As the diagram indicates, he's searching for a direct and immediate route to the other, what he calls the non-exclusive audience. So while I agree, specters are haunting the arts, and in particular, the specter of evaluation is haunting us. These are systems determined by the value of art, determining the value of art, driven by so-called experts. So here he has gallery directors, critics, historians, and academics.
Dr. Marnie, sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Marnie. It's Akil here, just voicing some audio. We're having trouble seeing what you're talking about. What we currently see is just your PowerPoint screen, but with all of the slides, and we're on slide 1. And so that's okay. You're doing a great job. What we're going to do
I'm on slide 2 from where I am.
So it's all good. What we're going to do is we're going to transition, and Erica is going to share her screen with the PowerPoint in full screen mode. And you're going to then cue Erica just to make sure that we know what you're talking about. So
thanks so
let
much,
us know.
guys.
Now I can say that I see slide 1 and now slide 2 in full screen, and now a drawing that you're talking about. So please, Dr. Marnie, as you were. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Sorry about that. This always happens, doesn't it? But we should know better by now, 2 years later into Zoom. So my apologies, and thanks for the tech support. So what I wanted to do is sort of critique this drawing and add to the center of the chart communities and families, as well as maybe pepper around the outside of the chart other sectors like health, education, aged care, environment, economic, youth, these different groups that we work with. And to ask, what does success look like to each of these different groups in a project? Are these values shared? I don't think they are, actually. Is it an exchange of value? I personally think that difference and some of the tensions is where we can learn from each other and shift some of the power imbalances and understanding. So that's why I'm interested in evaluation, because of this sort of conversation and exchange about value and values, not at the end of a project, but at the start, when we sit down in a room in a circle over some food, in the company of artists, communities, whoever needs to be at the table to talk about what their aspirations are. We can identify some outcomes that we're interested in, but we need to make space and leave room for those wonderful spontaneous things that can come out of sort of, surprises once we get to know each other and these values and power systems start to shift. Things will change. Next slide, please. So I'll briefly share with you 2 case studies, community dance projects in Australia. And thanks, Anna-Leah, for drawing my attention to those articles that are logged into that website on seniors dance projects. It's just perfect. So the first is called the Coming Back Out Ball and the Elders Dance Club. And I do want to also give a shout out to Peter Murray, who's calling in from very early morning in Melbourne, who's going to be a partner working on this project as a researcher with me next year. I believe Peter's someone who attends the dance club quite regularly as well. So the first thing is to talk about why the project was developed. And you can see a man in black in the middle dancing, and that's Tristan Meacham. He's one of the lead artists for a group called, queer performance group called All the Queen's Men. And he was interested in learning more about his own community, celebrating and learning the history of the LGBT plus community in Australia. As folks were moving into aged care centers and facilities, there was some recent research that came out reporting a re-traumatization of this community having to come out again in spaces that were not culturally safe. This was also the time in 2017, 2018, when the Australian government put out the same-sex marriage on a postal vote, which was reported to me as an emotionally violent intervention that divided some relationships, families, and communities. So they started the dance club to respond to this concern around social isolation. And it was held on a Sunday afternoon, I think every second week, in the town hall with a live band, cups of tea, champagne for special occasions, with seniors and their allies to learn new dance moves. So I think here they're learning, I don't know if it's the foxtrot or maybe the Macarena. So the actual program has pivoted online. If anybody wants to join, we'll put the link in the chat a little bit later, but you might be dancing in the middle of the night. Next slide, please. So the Coming Back Out Ball, which was the spectacular social arts event celebrating the contributions of LGBTI plus people aged 65 plus in the state of Victoria. More than 350 elders from across the state attended. There were dozens of queer performers, health and social care partners, and another 50 young allies were paired with seniors who came on their own, someone to dine and dance with. One example of the ripple effects of this project was the Uber rideshare company was also a sponsor, driving some guests to their rural homes after midnight of the ball, 3 hours out of the city. They, of course, had to undertake cultural safety training. And they, of course, heard wonderful stories from the ball and also, concerns about how things were going. I can talk, on and on about what people might consider the impacts of this work, but I'll talk more specifically about our methodology. So it was co-designed with an elders council, artists and key partners. We undertook, firstly, a literature review of media, policy, and practice to be able to position and contextualize the work and to theorize queer aesthetics, the idea of spectacle. And this was really key to identifying their own framework on behalf of the community. So we, of course, collected data from all the traditional tools like surveys and interviews in person and in line, but that was really limited. And we, focused primarily on open-ended dialogue, what we were calling long-form storytelling. And as I often do, I looked to my students for some help. A dozen public arts students who identify with the queer community collaborated, and they had long visits with some of these seniors about their lives and about the ball as well. Of course, difficult stories of the history of criminalization, victimization, medicalization, grief, but also love, pride, really generous advice and criticisms of the event and the project, but also some incredible advice about what could be done to support the community. So the point that's really interesting to me about this evaluation project was how we actually analyzed the data. So, usually all of these sort of stories and numbers and all the quantum qualitative stuff goes into, big machine and it spits out a report. Of course, we did a lot of, grouping of themes and identifying some unexpected outcomes and things like this, but we brought it back to the community for a series of public town hall conversations, discussed about how people wanted to be represented. There was a lot of debate because, of course, like every community, there's a lot of diversity. So before we ended up co-writing the reports and findings and policy recommendations, this cycle of going back to the community, rewriting, redoing, and ensuring that community members and leaders' voices were central to the work. There was recommendations that were made not just to the arts sector, but policy recommendations to housing, aged care, and state government. So none of that could be done if it wasn't for the sort of broad group of intergenerational and intersectional exchange between the seniors and the young people. And many of those friendships are, of course, maintained. I'm pleased to report that we're partnering again this year to think through how to disseminate the model in other cities and countries, ensuring that both the artistic integrity and the social supports are there. Next slide, please. Thanks. So now, excuse me, closer to the remote top end of Australia, with the red dirt, kangaroos and crocodiles. The Indigenous Traditional Dance Program was a 3-year project culminating in a festival. Again, I was invited by the artists working on the project and community to collaborate on thinking through how to do an evaluation. Investment for this project from Art Back NT, a state-based arts organization that often tours bush bands through the desert and remote communities. The investment was primarily focused on 2 workers, a wonderful partnership between a local coordinator, senior Yanyuwa Garawa woman, Marlene Timothy, who you can see at the front of the line of the dancers with the kangaroo crown. That's Marlene Timothy, and her partner in crime was cultural producer Leah Paapa, who didn't live in the community, but came to visit over the 3 years of the project. A powerhouse team with complementary skills and cultural knowledge exchange. So Burralula is a unique community, like all communities. It's home to 700 residents, and this is 5 language groups, and also an iron ore mine. Here you can see Marlene leading the dancers in a contemporary story about how the back of the rainbow serpent was broken. That is how the river was polluted. When going out hunting, the kangaroos are gone, the fish are sick. The festival takes place on a hot weekend over 3 nights at the cricket grounds, as you can see. People travel for days to come and dance. The audience sits behind in the field, behind the singers. There's no fourth wall in this performance. So recognizing my complete outsiderness to this project, we agreed that a participatory evaluation would ensure local knowledge was centered. And I worked with the community, with our Marlene and lead up to collect some stories and thoughts from people. This was made into an incredible soundtrack, which actually welcomed the audience to the festival. The voices of elders, young people, and other community members and partners talked about the significance of the festival. So I'll wrap up because I see Shauna here. But what I wanted to really stress about this evaluation, much like the Coming Back Out ball, was that there was incredible sort of theorization that came out of this critical thinking about practice from a self-determined position. I'm there as a research partner, not as somebody who's going to collect data, take it out and give it back. That data is not mine. Those aren't my stories to be stolen. As often researchers and fly in, fly out workers, like at the mine, leave very little value behind, digging stories out of that ground and leaving environmental damage, scarring, pollution. So I was privy to some very sensitive stories and traditional cultural knowledge. So what I do is I ensure in the contracts and agreements that we set up is that the data is always owned by community and can never be appropriated by university or government funders. So when I present to you today, I check in to make sure it's okay that this is what I can represent our experience together was. So finally, the project, the rich sort of theoretical framework that was developed through all of these conversations, particularly with the elder women, the Bardi Bardi, sort of a cultural governance system in the community, was identifying the 4 main streams, which was cultural maintenance, transmission of knowledge, a site of cultural exchange between the language groups, and a space for cultural understanding between Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities. And the final word is from a local elder about intergenerational learning. And he says, you know it's working when the young ones are learning because the red dust flies up. So I'll leave you with that metaphor to think about. And I've got a couple of questions that I can pose a little bit later. But thanks so much, Shauna, for your patience.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marnie Badham. That was absolutely incredible to see these case studies. And you really talk about the sensitivity in working with community, in doing evaluation. It's a really important perspective, and it's sort of a little bit about what Annalee was talking about, the ethics involved in evaluation. So we'll have some questions about this after, I'm sure. In the meantime, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kim Vanderwoord next. Kim Vanderwoord is a member of the Nomgis First Nation from Alert Bay, BC. Kim is the founding owner of Reciprocal Consulting, an Indigenous consulting firm specializing in program evaluation and research. She has over 25 years of experience conducting local, provincial, and national program evaluations, managing over 300 projects. Kim completed her PhD in psychology at Simon Fraser University. Her dissertation was the recipient of the Michael Scriven Dissertation Award for outstanding contribution to evaluation theory, methodology, or practice. Kim also received the Canadian Evaluation Society Contributions to Evaluation in Canada 2014 Award for her mentorship of Indigenous students. More recently, Kim was awarded the 2018 BC Community Achievement Award and the 2018 Mitchell Award through the BC Achievement Foundation, as well as the Indigenous Business Award 2018 for businesses with 3 to 10 people. Kim and her team at Reciprocal Consulting are passionate about justice, equity, and culturally responsive research and evaluation. Over to you, Dr. Kim Vanderwoord.
Gila Kasla, Nuguam, Glalasiam, Nuguam, Namgis Oxman. I shared with you the name that my grandmother gave me at our family's first potlatch after the potlatch ban. I am a member of the Namgis Nation, which is in Alert Bay, a small island off the north coast of Vancouver Island in British Columbia. I have with me my wonderful colleague, Billy Joe Rogers, who's from the Aamjiwnaang Nation, who will be, we thought about technology, sharing the PowerPoint with you. And I'm coming to you today. First of all, it's an enormous honor to be with you all today. And thank you so kindly for including us in this. I'm coming to you today from the ancestral homelands of the Squamish people here in Vancouver, British Columbia, and really enjoyed the first 2 talks by the prior speakers. So thank you so much. We are an Indigenous consulting firm. If we can go to the next slide. This is some of our team, and I really stand on the shoulders of everyone on this team who have contributed enormous brilliance and thinking for how we approach our work. If we can go to the next slide. I know that the session is really to talk about why do we do evaluation, who's it for, how to explore participants. We don't necessarily have an art base in our team. We have dabbled in it, but I can say there is, as we all are like painfully aware, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in the world that evaluators have a front row seat in witnessing and thinking about. And there continues to be a significant upholding of the status quo with so many of the current context that we're living through with Black Lives Matter, Indigenous Lives Matter, Wet'suwet'en, gender-based violence and concerns definitely go on. If we go to the next slide, rather than asking who evaluation is for, which we can answer in many ways, as Shauna has done and the other 2 speakers, but we can talk maybe about the role we have as evaluators and who we are. So evaluation has a history of really policing communities and surveilling communities That has been really when we've had casual conversations in communities that we've had the enormous privilege of going to from coast to coast to coast. The feeling is fear. When we come in, even as Indigenous people coming into another Indigenous community, people express their fear about being part of an evaluation process. And that's because of the tone of surveillance and policing that has been underlying the framework of evaluation. We are pretty actively throwing the field under the bus for their role in upholding the status quo, because the field of evaluation is upheld by the Treasury Board in Canada and the policy on results. So those two pieces really complement things like the industrial nonprofit complex that we have, and the unwavering commitment evaluation has to social science research and positivist research methodologies. So if we go to the next slide, to understand why we evaluate and who, for whom we need to continue our deepening understanding of the root cause of social issues and social band-aids, really, our team reflects on, like, do we really understand the issues that we're talking about? So we've often gone back to the very definition of what is a program. A program is created to address a need. And I think we're maybe putting more emphasis on the program and less on the need. So we have been teaching and training through the Bounce Center for the Arts and Creativity. We have a course there, and also Simon Fraser University, to think about the need and the root cause a little bit more than the actual program and center that. One of the elders that we work with, beautiful, incredible soul, has said we have to say hello to the problem before we can say goodbye. And I don't think we've gotten there in a meaningful way in the field of evaluation. So I think a lot of the times when we talk about mixing quantitative and qualitative indicators, what we're calling it now is vanity metrics. So the number of sessions offered, the number of pieces of arts created, when we quantify a lot of these things, they really serve to show, to make the funder look good, because look, we produced all of these things without thinking deeper about why they need to be produced to begin with. So if we can go to the next slide. So what we're really hoping to do, because we had a meeting with one of the federal government departments, and they said evaluation is neutral, we're arm's length. We have 30 years of data showing that there's been no change in the work that we're doing, and that's fine because we're neutral and arm's length. To which we said, that is not neutral. It is like unequivocally not neutral to know that you're not having an impact when there's such incredible need and inequity, and to stand by that and say, we're okay, we'll continue with the programming as is. So the paradigm that we're in, and I know with arts, it's probably way more progressive than what our team has been grappling with, like the positivist research paradigm, the social science research paradigm. It's like white supremacy. It's just so baked in, and the beauty of it is that you can't see it, and you just so many accept it as the way that it should be, but it is becoming a little bit of a catastrophe, and I don't feel like I'm being dramatic when I say that. When I think about our family, and what my community, what other Indigenous communities are encountering. So if we go to the next slide, we feel that there is a lack of clarity in understanding what the problem is. Our team has worked on over 300 projects across Canada, and more times than not, the programs are developed in the capital of the province or the capital of the country, and communities twist into a pretzel, and not a beautiful artistic one, but a painful pretzel, so that they can get the funding, and nickel and dime and piecemeal the work together. So more times than not, there is maybe not a true understanding of what the issue, what the problem is that we're trying to solve for. To that end, we feel like evaluation is not asking the right questions. And then to that end, we feel that this group here has an amazing opportunity to influence the field of evaluation, to see what's going on and ask the right questions. I think one of the things that we're really passionate about with our team is ensuring that there is a groundswell. It's why we come to these events. It's why we teach. It's because we know that we can actually affect change when more people start seeing things. And one of the things we talk a lot, in fact, I'm going to a workshop right after this on white supremacy. So it's going to be kind of a a heady afternoon. But one of the things we say in a lot of the training we do is, like, once you start seeing things, you can't unsee them. So once you start seeing the 12 characteristics of white supremacy, you can't unsee them. And the field of evaluation is riddled with white supremacy. Some of you may see, if we can go to the next slide, some of you may see or have to work with these theories of change. We have seen these to perpetuate the status quo, because it limits you within, again, a positivist social psychology paradigm of how behavior change happens. And that all comes from social psychology, behavioral psychology, and it doesn't necessarily ring true. Add to that we continue to have some of the same issues that we have for a long time. If we go to the next slide, I'm really conscious of the time and wanting to get through. What we've come to say now is these theories of change are really more theories of status quo or theories of non-change, effectively. If we go to the next slide. So I think as part of the changing of or creating a groundswell, we're calling everyone in to engage in training, to look at resilient policy and thinking about how we can be a part of creating good simplicity theory policy. Let's get rid of complexity theory. We're calling everyone in to unpack the research, design, delivery, outcomes elements of an evaluation, unpack logic models. Like, do they really talk about humans? Theories of change, why we value numbers over story and visual. And I know everyone here in this call probably doesn't hold that value system, but part of the patriarchal colonial systems that we're in value that. So can we all come together and shake that up? And I feel like you have set the stage for that really well. And really the last thing is for us, like, let's unpack that ivory tower complex that exists both within the university setting, within the public sector, and really think about what fits with the pace of humans, the pace of communities. We're just not getting it right. Evaluators, again, have a front row seat telling that story and raising awareness about that. Thank you all so much for having us here. Gila Kasla, I'll turn it back to Shauna.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kim Vanderwoord. Thank you so much, Dr. Kim Vanderwoord. Wow, like incredible speakers. I know we have some questions, and Akil has been monitoring the chat. I guess one of the things that that Dr. Vanderwoord got me thinking about was, how can we change evaluation? Do we wait, for the questions to change on our reports, or can we help be the change and change the way we do evaluations in this field? Because maybe it's the time for change now. Can we be part of the change? Maybe that's the first question I could ask the speakers before we move on to Akil harvesting the questions in the chat.
Absolutely.
I mean, my simple response to that was, the time is yesterday. It's a crisis. There are literally people every 8 days, an Indigenous woman goes missing or is murdered in Canada. And how is that not a crisis? How are we not, like, the whole time that Black Lives Matter was happening in Canada, we had 8 or 9 Indigenous people shot by the police, and we didn't have our sport teams going on strike here in Canada. This is urgent. So I would say yesterday we need to tackle this.
Yeah.
Dr. Yassi?
Yeah, you can call me Annalie. I love to jump in on this because I so agree. I've been trained in quantitative methods, but I completely agree that the hegemony of the quantitative is really problematic. And it's quite clear why the status quo clings to the quantitative, clings to numbers. It hides power relations, it hides context, it hides agency. And so it assumes that a very narrow positivist view, as you say. And so I think we really do have to push back in academia, especially because that's where the ivory tower still maintains that a randomized control trial is much better than storytelling, and it's what you say is so important that I embrace it so fully, and I think we have to just keep that message of what quantitative is not showing in order to show its deficits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really, really good points. Yeah, Kim, that was an incredible presentation. Thank you so much. And I want to sort of join arms with you on this influencing a groundswell, because I think the people who are here this week are pretty incredible artists and community activists who probably, and I speak from experience of working in Saskatchewan in a socially engaged arts organization previously. So, when I went to Australia to do my PhD, it was like trying to figure out, like, how do you measure social change and, things like that. And I sort of chucked all those questions and techniques out to have really important questions about power and how to do practice in a way that's more ethical and about self-determination of communities, not putting more cultural capital into managers of programs. So, this sort of systemic challenges we're talking about, they go through the art world as well, right? So we can speak openly about that, I think. So the way that evaluations are designed often reflect the values of the organizations that are wanting to report. And unfortunately, sometimes the data and the quantitative data is only there to measure and reflect on what the cultural arts policy is, not about the practice. It's a waste of time for communities to be involved in these processes when, as you say, Kim, there's really important things going on in the world. So, let's talk at a really basic level about what's important, what's valued, and what values do we want to sort of promote through this work. I'm going to privileged position to be able to work for a university. So I can steal a lot of that cultural capital. And when I get gigs to do these projects, I bring the money in and then I hire someone from the community to lead the project from there, and I support them. But it took me a long time to learn how to do that with those systems and to be really available, present, and transparent. And I make mistakes all the time. But I think if we can have more conversations out loud about these things, we'll get further along.
Thank you, Marnie. Akil, do you have some
Yeah,
questions?
I do have some questions.
Okay,
But
great.
before we jump into those questions, I want to ask a follow-up question, and that is, we have amazing speakers and with your expertise and experience. I want to ask the follow-up question. So, what exactly do we do other than shouting it from the rooftops? Is it that? And which is very important, and I'm not saying that's not important, but where are the levers that we can identify? What are the things that we could change that folks might not have thought of? For example, if you're asked for quantitative data only, do you also make sure to send a pretty strongly worded email about the qualitative, right? What are some things we can do very tangibly on our end to push the needle and ultimately enable this groundswell of change that we ultimately in this room generally agree with? So I'll put it to Dr. Yassi first, and then we'll see if others want to jump in.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think our commitment that those of us are in positions of particular privilege at universities or tenure in particular have to be committed to speak truth to power. That it's if we're asked to be on a committee, an evaluation committee, push back on evaluations and only propose the quantitative, and be prepared to say what's wrong with an approach that doesn't recognize power relations, context, agency, all the things that stories that are so rich need to tell and need to complement. So I think that speaking to my peers in academia or who get onto these committees, you have an obligation to speak up when I keep using the word hegemonic because I can't think of a better synonym to it. An hegemonic approach is being proposed. So yeah, shout from the rooftops up, in whatever rooftop you can stand on.
Thank you, Dr. Yassi. Let's say to Dr. Vanderwoord first, and then to Marnie, just to throw some order in there.
Order in the chaos. I don't know that I'd have much to add. I think that's similar to what we do as well. It's really rare that people come to us for a purely quantitative project at this point, despite the fact that I absolutely love numbers. Being trained in psychology, like I love a good data set, but I know that only tells a really, really small part of the story. So when we work with communities, when we work with any project, we know that the public sector will shovel in all these indicators that you have to measure. And when we're working with an organization, we said, we know we have to measure that. Let's not even talk about it. It's like boring. It's going to happen. Let's talk about your blue sky. What is going to make you understand the issue better? What is going to make you like leap out of bed and want to continue doing this work and have that passion and drive? So we go to the blue sky at the start of every project. And I think that's how we've been seeing change. Like I think if Billy Joe and I were to talk about the change in our client base, even over the last 3 or 4 years, it's expanded significantly because I think more people want to see human, like being human again. I think we've really lost the plot on what this is all about. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Dr. Badham.
I don't have a lot else to add other than, like the others have said, do it through practice, do it through any influence you have. But often when I design evaluations, it's about centering, the practice and the artists and communities that are working, but then adding those other layers of different stakeholders so they can listen to those lived experiences, to those aspirations, to those challenges, to those, potential for harm in community and these practices as well. And make it really clear that, funders or other partners and stakeholders are there to listen and learn. So it's just, again, it's shifting power balances, and we can find ways to set this up with the structures that we bring in through evaluation and research, I think.
Dr. Yassi, is that your hand up to jump in here?
I just wanted to jump in because I saw this question about, that the funders say, yeah, but the government wants numbers. Again, we push back to say, how does the government know that the communities want numbers? The communities want stories. They don't care if 43% reduction in something versus 25% reduction. They want to know, why is this program working or not working? They want to know the why, and you don't get the why from numbers. You only, so I think that if the government says they want numbers, to say, no, challenge that. Say,
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Yassi. I want to voice a comment from our knowledge holder, Maggie McCready, who is with us and posted, create what we wish existed, that idea to motivate us, to push back and speak truth to power. I have a question here, first from Megan, and then if we have time, the question from Nicole. So the question from Megan here, how might sharing this evaluation tool, just to switch gears a bit, the evaluation tool shared by Dr. Yassi, how might sharing it help in building partnerships with non-ORTS organizations? It seems that this tool provides a level of detail and rigor that may speak to certain partners when we're talking about speaking in different languages of evaluations. So how might this tool help us speak to non-arts organizations? And I'll let you, Dr. Yassi, start us off here, as it's the particular tool that you shared.
Yeah, well, as you know, I'm a community-based health researcher, not an artist per se. And so I use all these techniques in my community-based work that sometimes aren't really arts oriented. So I think it's the tools and the way of thinking and the approach is generalizable. It's not unique to arts. And so it's easy, I think, to partner up with an environmental group or other non-arts organizations and say, these same principles hold regardless of whether it's art that we're evaluating or whether it's some other aspect.
Thank you. I want to voice Dr. Kim Vanderwoord had to jump out early, she says. She says it was a huge pleasure and an honor to be a part of this wonderful group. Thank you all for including us. I do have to go to my next workshop where we can continue to shake things up. And so as well, a phrase that, in her language, thank you. And so finally, if we have time for one question left in the chat here, that is from Nicole Bauberger. Hello, Nicole. And Nicole asks a specific question. Marnie, you talk about checking in. That's Dr. Badham. You talk about checking in about what you can share. What does that look like more specifically? Who do you check in with when you talk about that? And are there any challenges with capacity around that, with having enough time or resources to really check in with people?
Yeah, look, being invited into communities to do this work is, this invitation is like an honor, and I learn so much every time I do. It's also a responsibility, and it's relationships. And I don't think you should do the work if you don't have the capacity. And that is a pretty tough hitting suggestion. But, the other question, Annalie, I would add to that framework that we looked at the start is, what resources do you have to undertake evaluation? And being really clear up front what we can and can't do. And if we don't have the ability to maintain relationships, because things change over time, and particularly when individuals are involved in creative practices that are sometimes life-changing, right? Or changing the way we understand identity. Sometimes people change their minds on how they want to be represented. So we need to check in. My research is not focused on sort of the outcomes and data, but it's really about thinking about methodologies around community self-determination. So for instance, for these two projects that I spoke to today, that looks like a very abbreviated version of a report that's gone through a whole series of processes and workshops in community. It also means that last week I had a check-in with an artist and a community member in projects. So it's labor intensive, but it's part of my my own community and my own relationships and responsibility. Oh, I guess the other thing I wanted to add on that is to the ethics application that we have to do at universities is particularly when working with Indigenous communities, I ensure always to be co-leading with an Indigenous collaborator. And we always put a small section into the methodology around the process of checking back in and ensuring that we don't collect or use any traditional cultural knowledge. And that's just a bottom line every single time.
Thank you, Dr. Badham. Shauna.
Incredible comments in the chat. I think this panel really resonated with people at the gathering. It's given us a lot to think about, to be the change and really to think bigger, and the time was yesterday, and to really engage with community in the process and not just follow the same old systems and the same old processes in evaluation. So thank you very much. It was absolutely excellent, and it feels like it's the beginning of many more conversations. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.